When Taiwan's president met with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in California last Wednesday, China promised what it called a resolute and forceful response. 2 days later, they began a barrage of military drills showing their military muscle in the air and in the sea. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer reports from Taiwan's capital, Taipei, on the tense weekend.
Chinese video shows the extent of the exercises, both human and hardware, including, for the first time, an aircraft carrier, the Shandong, as well as nuclear-capable bombers. Today's live fire drills rehearsed a blockade of Taiwan, and, as this Chinese animation shows, strikes against specific targets on the island. In Beijing, the foreign ministry spokesman said the exercises were a serious warning to Taiwan's separatist and what he called external forces, that is, the U.S. and its allies. Specifically, their retaliation for the meeting in L.A. between President Tsai Ing-wen, who insists Taiwan will remain independent, and Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who signaled the U.S. would help protect it from China.
We will honor our obligations and reiterate our commitment to our shared values, behind which all Americans are united.
To the Taiwanese taking a break on Taipei's network of cycle trails, the exercises were unpleasant but familiar. Taiwan's Coast Guard released video of sailors warning Chinese warships from a safe distance to back off, but they are seriously outmanned and outgunned, so there was a sigh of relief when the Chinese declared the exercises over this afternoon and headed home.
To everyone's relief, this round was just practice, but there is still a potential for war over Taiwan, though at the moment all sides say they want to avoid it. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, Taipei.
Joining us now is Timothy Heath. He's a senior international and defense researcher for the RAND Corporation. Timothy, what's your assessment of the nature of these military exercises on the part of the Chinese? What were they showing? How bristling were they? How do you rate it?
Well, I think the exercises were designed to be very intimidating, and they were. However, there are some interesting aspects about it that I think show that Beijing is trying to calibrate carefully its messaging. So on the one hand, we had an encirclement of Taiwan with ships and aircraft. That demonstrates Beijing's willingness and ability to carry out a blockade. We also had simulated missile strikes, which shows China is capable of carrying out a range of punitive missile strikes on military targets across the entire island. So those were very intimidating and coercive. However, what is also notable is that there was no amphibious assault drill, which suggests China is trying to downplay the idea that it intends to invade and conquer Taiwan, at least in the near term. So I think there is a calibration of messaging that is going on in Beijing. They're trying to intimidate Taiwan, but at the same time, not overreact.
So is it then important, as the United States and China learn how to respond to each other's acts like this, that U.S. policymakers understands exactly the choreography that you're talking about and the limits of it, and don't go too far in responding, or, to the contrary, recognize it as something new and perhaps give a stronger response?
Yes, I think absolutely. It's important for the U.S. government to also calibrate its messaging. It's in everybody's interest to avoid a war. And so extremely provocative actions by the U.S. that, exacerbate China's fears really doesn't help the region. It doesn't really help the U.S. And neither does underplaying the situation and encouraging China to be more aggressive. So developing a deterrent response that demonstrates U.S. interest in stability and yet at the same time avoids excessive provocation is really, really important.
What's the degree of risk here that something could go wrong if a lot of this is choreographed to send messages? Could something go wrong and the Chinese send more of a message than they mean to, and the same with the U.S.? And then if I can just add to that, what do the countries learn from these drills? Does the U.S. learn anything about Chinese capabilities? And are the Chinese going through a kind of shape-up drill that makes them more ready?
Well, very good questions. Regards to the first point, there is a risk. There is a risk that something could happen. The Chinese are trying to send a strong message. They are rallying nationalist support. These drills appear to be popular in China, and that limits the leadership's wiggle room in the event something unintended happens. For example, the Chinese are making a point of making incursions deeper and deeper into Taiwan's airspace and water space. They cross the center line repeatedly. And this effort to normalize incursions raises the risk that there could be an incident. So that is quite dangerous. And then in terms of what we can learn, we are seeing the Chinese show that they are thinking about punishing acts that they regard as separatist through options like missile strikes, which could destroy a lot of targets, military targets or civilian on the island. And we see that they are thinking about blockades as an option. But we should also be aware that these drills would be fully compatible with an invasion if China someday decides to go down that path.
All right, Timothy Heath, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.